Is it time for a TARP exit strategy? And I mean a total TARP exit strategy. And by the way, will conservatives begin to reapply their own core principles? We now welcome back rising Republican star, chairman of the Senate Republican Policy Committee, John Thune, South Dakota. Senator Thune, welcome back. I have a friend of mine here, Lou Dobbs, who's going to join me in the interview. I hope you don't mind.
That's fine, Larry. I'm just trying to figure out how you're snagging all these high-powered guests now.
How you doing, Senator? Just lucky, I guess. Mr. Thune, you have another bill out to end TARP at the end of the year. I want to ask you, sir, if you were to succeed, let's call it $300 billion in surplus money left over, would you retire debt, or would you give that back to the taxpayers in the form of lower tax rates in some way, shape, or form?
Right now, and what the bill stipulates and specifies is it would retire debt. I do think that if we were ever going to do anything stimulus-wise, which of course the Democrats are now talking about, that it ought to be in the form of tax relief. But no, what my bill is very straightforward. It just simply says that funds that are paid back into the TARP account should be used to pay down debt. Any unobligated balances shouldn't be spent, so it will reduce the amount that the government spends. And right now, my argument is the most important issue I think that we have to deal with is this ballooning federal debt, which is, I think, going to be a real burden on the economy for some time to come. And if we don't do something about it, we're going to be in big trouble down the road. And I think this TARP program presents a good opportunity to send a signal that we are serious about deficit reduction. If we don't do that, it will get spent. There are all kinds of designs on this money already.
Senator, Larry and I have just been talking about, if you will, the national debt, at least at the margin here. $300 billion, if at the outside that's how much is left, and let's assume that is it. It is a proverbial thimble full of response to an incredible budget crisis in this country and debt crisis. Could there not also be perhaps some consideration that what is needed now is not symbolism, but real response to a structural deficit and to an immense national debt that means we have to have an intelligent, honest national debate about how we're going to deal with a nation that is being swamped? I mean, the president himself said back in May that he acknowledged the country is out of money and then decided to spend another $6 trillion. I mean, what in the world are we going to do? There's got to be something beyond symbolism, doesn't there?
There does, and it starts by stopping this $3 trillion massive expansion of the government with health care, which I just, the timing of all this stuff, whether it's health care, whether it's the stimulus, all this spending is just completely out of control. And we do have to get it under control, Lou. You're absolutely right. Maybe this is $300 billion. It's hard to believe that we're talking about $300 billion as not being a lot of money. But we've got to start somewhere, and if we don't start there, it will get spent. This is money that already they're talking about other things, other ways of using it, and I think that that's $300 billion, and hopefully when the other monies are paid back, if they are, and we don't know that they're all going to be paid back, but it would be $700 billion. But let's end this program and make sure that any dollars that are paid back into the fund are applied to the debt, and that we aren't spending this additional $300 billion. And then let's have an honest discussion about what are we going to do with spending? What are we going to do about these entitlement programs that are going to break and bankrupt the country if we don't take steps to reform them?
But Senator Thune, I got to say, as much as I agree with you and Lou about the long-term debt problem and the spending problem, I agree with that. Right now, with 10.2% unemployment, I believe people want to see a real economic growth and jobs creation policy, which the Obama administration has not provided. And you talk about core conservative principles in your Washington Times editorial. One of those core principles, as per Ronald Reagan, was lower tax rates to create economic growth. The Democrats have tried to spend their way into economic growth. That's not going to work. It never does. Why wouldn't you want to keep this money away from spending by, let's say, cutting the tax rate for employers and employees on the payroll tax? That would help job creation, would it not?
That's a good suggestion. You've been advocating that for some time. I actually thought that when we did the stimulus bill, that would have been a good way to do it. It would have gotten money immediately out there into the economy. And in fact, in a way where people weren't even receiving a check that frankly, I think when you do it through the payroll, most of that's going to get plugged back into the economy. It's going to get spent. if there is any kind of an additional stimulus plan, Larry, and I don't know that there will be, I don't think it ought to be government spending. It ought to be in the form of tax relief for small businesses and marginal income tax rate reduction and payroll tax reduction, things like that that will actually get the economy growing again. I, like you, agree that what was successful in the 80s was the Reagan approach to this, but we also have to get spending under control, and I guess that's what I'm talking about with the TARP program. We've got to quit spending. $1.5 trillion federal deficit this last year. We're on the on the pace to do that again this year. We cannot sustain trillion-dollar deficits as far as the eye can see, doubling the federal debt in 5 years, tripling it in 10. This is just, we are on a path right now that is just absolutely reckless, and we've got to stop it.
If we all acknowledge that that reckless path is the creation of at least two administrations, one Democratic, this one, and the previous Republican, why is it that we cannot come to terms with the reality that this debtor nation in perpetuity that we seem to have created has now reached an inflection point? We have to make a decision, it seems at least to me, Senator, as to how we're going to restore fiscal responsibility to this country and to this government. We have to hear two competing visions, at least. I would prefer 3 or perhaps 4 from the partisan parties, perhaps independent voices as well, certainly, as to what the next 5 and 10 years should look like in this country. We're hearing neither from the Republican Party, of which you are a leading light, nor the Democratic Party, of course, of which President Obama is the leader. What in the world can all of you in Washington, D.C. expect of the American people but great frustration and boiling, frankly, resentment and mistrust to see what the stewards of the nation, that is, our elected officials in both the Senate, the House, and the White House, are resulting in through their policies?
I think you can kind of look at what's happening in Britain and Cameron and what they're doing. He's sort of inspiring the people in that country to embrace this idea that we're going to have to make some hard choices, and that the fiscal situation that they found themselves in and what we're finding ourselves in this country is going to require hard decisions. And I think that will require some level of bipartisan support, which we haven't seen. Now,
Senator, I haven't heard a single Republican or a single Democrat with the guts to say we have in this country come to a point where we're going to have to make tough choices. We cannot support our entitlements programs, Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security.
Well, let's have a new entitlement. Let's have a new entitlement. Isn't that what this whole health care debate? And wait a second, Lou.
You're right.
This new entitlement is going to cut the budget deficit.
Yes.
That's what the Congressional Budget Office is
If you spend $1 trillion, you reduce the deficit.
I mean, it's
pretty exciting.
Would someone call this fuzzy math at some point?
Fuzzy. I mean,
fuzzy math.
This is beyond fuzzy.
Senator Thune, just in our last moment here, your op-ed piece, I just want to get to it. You really kind of make a cri de coeur about self-governance and empowerment. And
what's a cri de coeur for crying out loud?
From the heart, a cry from the heart.
I would think that conservative like you wouldn't talk that French.
You know, I'm a multilingual guy.
He's enlightened, Lou.
I don't know if I'm multilateral, but I think I'm multilingual, and I think I better stop there before I get into a whole lot of trouble. But I do like your message of self-governance, and I want to ask you where you're going to go with that.
Well, I think we have to get away from this belief that government can solve all our problems. I mean, we as a country were founded on a basic principle and belief in freedom. And what we're talking about now is turning 1/6 of our economy with health care over to the federal government and remaking the American economy in the image of Europe. We can't do that. But to Lou's point about spending, we need leadership on that issue. We've got to attack this debt, and we've got to put together proposals next year, and the Republicans will, that will address this issue of year-over-year spending increases that are double-digit, and stimulus programs and health care entitlement growth. All those things are going to be on our agenda.
All right. Thanks very much, Senator John Thune. We appreciate your time, as always, sir.
Good to see you, Senator.
Thanks, Lou.
All right.